this top 8 game, because at the end of the day, you are the man of the hour, the man to beat. Also top 4 at Worlds in 2016.
And Oceania?
Oh, yeah, Oceania incoming champion. This is the guy. This is the guy.
This is the guy. Of course this is the guy. You can tell by the way that they're playing with the camera that this is the guy. Absolutely. But, you know, it's really special to me how well Eduardo Cunha has done over the last couple of seasons. And even just last year, those are 2 phenomenal placements. But also, let's take a look at Brady Smith, because Brady's definitely not anyone to scoff at either. And you can tell by the way that they're playing with the camera, too, and standing up on stage. This is definitely a person to beat, too.
Yeah, I like that American flag cape thing that he has going on there. That's certainly a new one, but you know, incoming 2020 Daytona, Florida regional champion, you gotta play up that segue just a little bit. Top 32 at Worlds in 2018. You know, no stranger to the regional stage. However, definitely looking to prove himself here on the international stage. You know, this is a huge top 8 for Brady, and knowing that he's going into this undefeated, you know, you can tell he's just hungry for that top 4, hungry
Absolutely.
for that finalist and maybe even championship title. And what better way to prove that you're ready for it than defeating the incoming Oceania international champion?
It's going to be a tough one, though. Eduardo has been able to get himself out of some sticky situations in the past, which really speaks volumes to how they play as a trainer and how well they prepared for this event. But I think it's safe to say that we are going to see some more shenanigans here. Brady Smith may not have been on stream quite yet, but we've definitely seen pieces of this team before.
Oh, without a doubt. That combination of the Gengar and the Bisharp, I think you had the pleasure of casting a very similar team the other day, and
Yes,
those two were just very powerful together. You know, Bisharp having access to the Defiant ability, which will really punish the Intimidates that the Arcanine on Eduardo's side of the field will be bringing to this match. And it's something that you have to be very careful about. You have to play around. Looking at how Brady's team matches up against Eduardo's, you know, I think there's a lot of interesting potential there for the Bisharp to do some work. Getting access to, you know, same type attack boosted dark type attacks is going to be huge against that Gourgeist. You know, Sucker Punch is always something that is a lot of fun to sort of have on your side, but very difficult to play around if you're the opponent. And just interesting attacks. You know, I love the Conkeldurr on there to cover the possibility of Trick Room. You know, he can also cover the the Durant on Eduardo's side of the field. So I think Eduardo's going to have to think very hard about how he wants to approach this battle, because Brady has a lot of options to sort of handle the Durant, handle the Tyranitar, and the Gastrodon and the Togekiss we've seen do so well for him in the past couple days of this tournament. I'm excited to see how these trainers are going to approach Game 1, because this could be a super close match.
This is absolutely, it absolutely has some potential to be a super close match, just given how we've really seen Eduardo play in the past. Haven't gotten a chance to see Brady just yet, but given the record that they have going into today, into just this morning and coming into this afternoon, I definitely expect this one to be a close one. So let's take a look at what's on the field for both of these players. Brady Smith leading with the Togekiss and the Rotom Wash, and Eduardo Cunha is going to have that Tyranitar and that Togekiss.
So another Rotom lead here at the International Championships, and I like how this Rotom is immediately applying pressure onto the field, forcing that Gastrodon switch in so that a Max Geyser would not immediately knock out that Tyranitar, as we've seen happen so many times throughout the earlier rounds of this event.
But it is not actually going to be the Rotom Wash that gets the boost. It's going to be the Togekiss that gets the Dynamax energy. And that's something that's going to be a little bit different here. Knowing, though, that Rotom still packs a singular water-type attack is going to be something that Brady's going to have to think about whether or not they did end up clicking that button. But Eduardo is matching that right off the bat with a Dynamax of their own. Tyranitar getting supersized as well. So it was going to be a match of the Dynamaxes between this Togekiss and this Tyranitar. Let's see what they end up doing here, because the Rotom is going to go for a nasty plot, but is it going to get it for free? It may have the ability to move first, but we're not sure what it's going to do quite yet. Special attack is going to get boosted, and then we're going to see a max airstream coming out from that Togekiss. So in the next couple of turns, the speed's going to end up being a lot faster for Brady Smith's side of the field.
And I like how Brady's getting that speed control in already. Even though the Tyranitar is going to be naturally slower than these two Pokemon on his side of the field, you
Ooh.
never know what your opponent is going to have. And just making sure that you can be faster no matter what, especially when you're relying on a strategy such as Nasty Plot from Rotom, is super important. I like the targeting of this past turn. I really like how Togekiss used Max Airstream to put Gastrodon within knockout range from a second one. I think that's going to be really important because of the Nasty Plot on Rotom, because Brady has indicated that that's the Pokemon he wants to sort of take on the offensive, maybe to counter this Tyranitar. And once Gastrodon is gone, that Rotom will have the opportunity to go for it. So I like how Eduardo is also matching that with the Protect. Big question here, though, is will the Togekiss be able to pick up the KO?
Togekiss looking for the KO onto the Gastrodon, but Gastrodon ended up protecting, so it will protect itself. Not entirely, because max moves are going to go through Protect, but you are going to get a pretty good chunk of damage. But Tyranitar able to fire back with a Max Darkness. This Max Darkness going to try to do the last bit of damage to this Rotom, so that Nasty Plot not actually going to be able to see any value from this particular first game.
Yeah, and I think what happened there, I was quite honestly expecting Brady to target that Tyranitar with the Togekiss, maybe with something like the Max Starfall, just for the big damage down onto that Tyranitar, but I don't think a lot of Gastrodon run Protect in this format. It's one of those Pokemon that you really wish you had a 5th or maybe even a 6th move slot
Absolutely.
on. So knowing now that the Gastrodon has Protect, I would be very hesitant to see Brady go for something like that turn again. You know, he really did not want to lose his Rotom there, and that's just more information for him to tuck away for a later round of this match, especially knowing that Arcanine was laying in wait in the back of Eduardo's party.
Arcanine is in the back and is going to come in to get an Intimidate off. Not going to help, though, against this Max Airstream. And the Max Airstream doing over half damage, almost 2/3 damage to this Arcanine on the switch in. And importantly, again, just continuing to raise the speed on that side of the field. Fortunately, though, that Max Airstream is going to put this Arcanine within Berry Eating range, but Conkeldurr going for the Drain Punch. Tyranitar taking it like a champ, and more importantly, getting that weakness policy proc. So this Tyranitar is about to be very, very scary. Going for the Max Rockfall now. Let's see who it targets down. It is going to be that Togekiss, and look at how quickly that HP just deletes.
Yeah, I think that the Intimidate that turn onto the Conkeldurr was absolutely huge. Without that Intimidate, it's possible that the Drain Punch from that Conkeldurr would have been enough to knock out that Tyranitar outright. It would have been close, just trying to eyeball the damage. You know, there is the possibility that the Tyranitar would have been able to survive, but picking up the KO on Tyranitar before it's able to activate that weakness policy, as we've seen so many times before in this format throughout this weekend, is very, very important. So even though Brady is down to his final 2 Pokemon and is in a little bit of a disadvantage here, potentially a greater disadvantage if Eduardo decides to cycle out that Arcanine and get a couple more Intimidates down onto the field, he has a lot of information, and information is going to be really key going into games 2 and potentially even games 3 of this matchup, where I think we're going to start seeing some interesting reads from both these players.
It's not over quite yet. Arcanine for Brady going for the Will-O-Wisp, which is really important onto this Tyranitar. Tyranitar, with that weakness policy boost, is going to just go back to normal. The Drain Punch, though, this time going into the Arcanine. So Brady not only going to get that critical hit, but more importantly, going to get the knockout and also get healed back up to full. So that Arcanine for Eduardo not going to be able to do anything for this turn. Tyranitar firing back with a Rock Slide. It is super effective damage to the Arcanine, but look at how little it does to that Conkeldurr.
Yeah, knowing that Arcanine does indeed carry Will-O-Wisp is also going to be huge as well. This is a game of information right now. I think that this Conkeldurr has an opportunity to bring this back if the Arcanine on Brady's side of the field can find a way to handle the Togekiss that Eduardo has laying in wait. You know, between the burn and the fighting type moves on the Conkeldurr, I don't think Tyranitar is necessarily something that Brady has to worry about anymore. It's going to be this Togekiss that is the biggest threat for him right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see Brady at least consider, you know, how much information he wants to give up here. Knowing how much damage the Togekiss does to the Conkeldurr after a Snarl for games 2 and again potentially games 3 is going to be really important. So I liked how he went for that here. We'll have to see how close it gets to a knockout.
I agree. Dazzling
Okay.
Gleam
So
doesn't. It gets close.
it gets close, but without the critical hit and with the snarl, it still did less damage than I was honestly anticipating. That could be an indication that this Conkeldurr is holding a assault vest, especially if it's carrying Ice Punch. That's such a unique move that you don't otherwise see.
Ooh. All Pokemon hanging on for this turn, and the Sandstorm going to subside, so no more chip damage coming out onto those non-ground type Pokemon.
So Brady does have an opportunity here to go for a second Snarl and a second Ice Punch. That will leave himself open to another Rock Slide from that Tyranitar, but Rock Slide can miss, and if this Arcanine is able to find itself staring against the Gastrodon and the Togekiss, it's very, very possible that Brady might actually get a win out of this match. It's super close, even though both these trainers are just down to the wire, but unfortunately for Brady, one of the benefits of running these Super Luck Togekiss with something like a Scope Lens is that those critical hits will ignore any stat changes on the field, and that is exactly why that was an easy, clean KO after doing so little damage the previous turn.
I love that tech onto Togekiss. I know a lot of people are like, hey, you know what? It's not so great. It's a little stinky, but I kind of like it. I kind of like it because it allows for you to get those knockouts in situations where you might otherwise not be able to completely finish the job. So I think that was really great heads-up play from Eduardo, and of course a little bit lucky on the side.
Yeah, it's a interesting form of consistency, because when you think about Pokemon, you think about wanting to find these strategies that will consistently get you wins in a game that is really riddled with a lot of, luck, a lot of random numbers, a lot of, move misses or what have you. But by having a Togekiss with Super Luck, knowing that a lot of people look to a move like Snarl or maybe even like those max moves that can lower special attack as a way to sort of mitigate damage, you can say, given this situation, given the board state, I have a chance of just doing my normal amount of damage regardless. And again, Togekiss is such a unique Pokemon to actually take advantage of that. What we saw play out in that game 1 was, I think, exactly why you want to run something like Super Luck over something like Serene Grace. You need that damage, especially when otherwise that Conkeldurr was set up to use Drain Punch to just consistently recover and eventually pick up the KOs.
I like how Eduardo also played around the Tyranitar getting burned on their side of the field, only because that could have been disastrous if that Tyranitar had to be the last source of damage. So I think that's something else that you kind of need to look at as well. Preserving the Togekiss just in case something like that happened to the Tyranitar was a really great heads-up end gameplay.
Yeah, and when you have a Pokemon like Conkeldurr, these bulky fighting type Pokemon that your opponent has revealed, saving something like a Togekiss until the end of the game is a really smart strategy. You know that you're going to be able to deal super effective damage against it with something, like the Dazzling Gleam or maybe even an Air Slash, which are Togekiss's two sort of top moves right now in the format. And you just keep that in your back pocket so you have it available. Looking at Brady's, the Pokemon he brought to that game, there's nothing really other than the Bisharp that would threaten that Togekiss. So, acknowledging the Pokemon that he's brought, and saving that Togekiss for a later board state when you need to rely on, not only the Super Luck ability, but just the damage it puts out, I think is a really smart play from Eduardo. I don't think that the Tyranitar being burned was actually detrimental at that point in time, because if anything, it lured Brady into a false sense of security. I know it's been intimidated, I know it's been burned, so it's not going to deal that much damage to me. I'm sure it'll be fine if I just ignore it for a couple of turns, but that wasn't true at all. Those Rock Slides really started adding up.
The Rock Slides added up just because it was super effective damage, but also there was that chance to get the flinch as well. And even though we didn't actually see any of those flinches happen, it was still kind of nice to know that, hey, there is a secondary effect that I might be able to take advantage of if that happens.
Where there is a Rock Slide, there is a way. I think if Eduardo wants to potentially look at that as a out for this this second game of this top 8 match, he's going to need to find a way for that Tyranitar to be a lot faster than it was. He could always match the Dynamax Togekiss on Brady's side of the field with some Dynamax Airstreams of his own. That is always a option when it comes to speed control. But without that, you know, unless he decides to completely pivot and go for something like the Trick Room on the Gorgeist, which is always a possibility. I don't think Tyranitar is going to be finding itself in a position where it can use that Rock Slide for its flinching capabilities. I don't think you want to bring Trick Room against Brady in this matchup. I don't think that's the adjustment that Eduardo needs to make here. Just because of that Conkeldurr, we saw the Ice Punch reveal. You know, we know that Conkeldurr traditionally is not a fast Pokemon. It's very slow, it's very bulky, it thrives in Trick Room. So if you decide to adjust by maybe using that as your strategy, you would have to make the call that your opponent would not bring Conkeldurr, which I don't think Brady wants to do. He just has to get rid of the Togekiss on Eduardo's side of the field, and then Conkeldurr is fine to do whatever he wants. And fortunately for Brady, he has multiple ways he can do that.
Well, Brady's way of choice is going to be using Arcanine and Rotom Wash, where Eduardo is bringing out Arcanine and Tyranitar. Now there's two dogs staring each other down, and it's going to be some Intimidates firing off on both sides of the field, and you love to see it.
They're both good boys.
They're both good boys. They're both doing what good boys do best, and that's going to be intimidating their opponents.
Good, scary boys. But no, I like how the Rotom again is making an appearance for Brady as a lead here. He's forcing Eduardo almost to reveal the Gastrodon just by having that Rotom on the field threatening that Hydro Pump. And I think that's a great information point for Brady to be able to force that so early on in game 2.
Oh, the Rotom, though, is going to miss this Snarl. That's going to be really important. That's because Rotom is such a huge special attacker, but the Snarl firing back from Brady's Arcanine isn't going to get those misses. In fact, just the icing on top of the cake there is going to be that critical hit onto the Gastrodon switch-in. So Rotom gets a chance to have a free Nasty Plot with no effect of that Snarl whatsoever.
So it has 2 turns where it can sit in front of this Gastrodon and this Arcanine and not care as much about the Snarls being fired back at it. I like that, again, Brady, just by having this Rotom Wash on the field, and this is a strategy we've seen throughout the weekend, forces the Gastrodon to be revealed from Eduardo. And thanks to the Nasty Plot, this Rotom can go for those electric type attacks into the Arcanine pretty safely. So Brady already has a lead in momentum here, and I'm curious to see how Eduardo is going to try and catch up.
Well, Snarl is going to be one of those ways. Just wants to try to eliminate as much of the Nasty Plot buff as possible from the Rotom Wash. But the switch-in from the Togekiss is actually really great because it preserves the Intimidate for later. But what is this? It's actually going to be a second Nasty Plot. Brady with such the heads-up play there. Gastrodon Scald is not going to do too much to that Rotom either. And my goodness, that was an incredible play. Just recognizing that Rotom was going to be safe to get off a second Nasty Plot.
Rotom was entirely safe to get off a second Nasty Plot. I mean, the worst thing that could have happened to that Rotom as an outcome of that turn would have been it gotten burned somehow and snarled. But thanks to the Nasty Plot, you know, this Rotom is at +3 attack, special attack right now. Even if it was burned, it still has plenty of health on the field. It's not being threatened by a knockout by this Gastrodon or this Arcanine unless there's a tech here that Eduardo hasn't really revealed yet. And on top of all of that, it now has its buddy Togekiss next to it, which can potentially protect it as well. Brady just calling that switch or that passive turn from Eduardo perfectly, and now is in a perfect spot to capitalize on it.
Capitalizing on it will be the Dynamax for Brady. Brady opting to use this Rotom Wash that has had that double Nasty Plot boost, and okay, it's not completely there because of the one Snarl that we got a chance to actually target down on that to Rotom. But it's still in a prime position here, especially when Togekiss is right next to it. Another Snarl, though, is going to connect with the Rotom as well as the Togekiss, and that's actually going to be really great for Eduardo just to try to reposition as best as possible. But Rotom's going for a Max Lightning right into the Arcanine, is going to get the knockout because that was an impressive number of Nasty Plots.
It was. After all of that effort, that Rotom still essentially had a free Nasty Plot to go for the offense, to go for that big damage. And even though this Togekiss did not Dynamax his turn and is going for an Air Slash of all moves against the Tyranitar, Brady is in an amazing spot to just attack whatever Pokemon comes in for Eduardo. If it's not the Gastrodon, he can go ahead and consider, targeting that Tyranitar or that Togekiss, which is going to be Eduardo's last Pokemon, with something like the Max Lightning. Or if he's worried about, the Gastrodon switching in, maybe he can go a little bit more defensive this turn and just hope that his own Togekiss will help pick up the damage onto that Tyranitar. He does have to watch out for the weakness policy. I think that's something that might be really key for Brady to sort of manage, because Eduardo hasn't gone for his own Dynamax yet, and you have to assume that with the potential of the weakness policy activation on the Tyranitar, that's the Pokemon that Eduardo's looking to take advantage of it.
Preserving the Arcanine for later, it's about time the Arcanine comes back in, especially when this Tyranitar is on the field. But the Togekiss that was once out for Eduardo is going to get switched out for the Gastrodon, just to potentially eat something like the Max Geyser that might be coming out from Brady's Dynamax Rotom. But it's time for Eduardo to go for the Dynamax as well, maneuvering really well around these Dynamax turns for Brady. So now they have a chance to utilize their own Tyranitar on the field, and it's also going to get that health boost. So really looking forward to seeing what this Tyranitar is capable of doing and whether or not this Gastrodon switch-in was worth it. Rotom, though, going for the Max Darkness instead, will be firing it right into the Gastrodon. Doesn't even miss a beat in terms of seeing the Gastrodon switch-in. So the special defense going to fall for both of the Pokemon on Eduardo's side of the field, but the Max Rockfall able to fire back onto the Rotom, but does barely anything versus what we actually saw that Rotom do to that Gastrodon.
What a incredible read there by Brady. Doesn't go for the Max Lightning into the Togekiss, predicting the switch into the Gastrodon, but instead reveals that this Rotom Wash is like many Rotom Wash we've seen here this weekend, also carrying that Dark Pulse, able to deal damage to this Gastrodon and put it into knockout range. We saw how little that Tyranitar was able to do in damage to that Rotom after the Intimidate from the Arcanine. You know that Brady is going to follow that up with something like the Will-O-Wisp we saw in Game 1 onto that Tyranitar. So Rotom is essentially unthreatened in its Dynamax form, ready to take advantage of those 3 turns to the best of its ability. Eduardo needs to find a way to knock out this Rotom through the Will-O-Wisp potential, through the Intimidate, in order to remain in this game.
Arcanine going to use that Will-O-Wisp to get the burn onto the Tyranitar and another Max Darkness.
Oh,
we saw how much it was going to be
man.
able to do, but that Gastrodon able to hold on, even with the critical hit.
Through Protect.
Through the Protect.
That was so much damage, and the special defense drops are starting to add up onto this Tyranitar as well.
Tyranitar now firing back with the Max Darkness of its own, but look at how little damage that does. That Rotom Wash is so safe. It's gotten so much value from these 3 turns of Dynamax that it has been able to have.
Fortunately, these special defense drops will come into play later once Eduardo's Togekiss returns to the field, and that might be what Eduardo is thinking in terms of how to utilize this Dynamax to the best of the ability. It's not going to be doing damage anymore because of the Intimidate, because of the burn, but if you can drop Rotom's special defense enough stages, and even Arcanine's too, so that Togekiss can come in and deal big damage and get those KOs and win this match, that is your win condition. Brady just needs to, finish up the KO on Gastrodon, can easily be done with something like a Snarl, pick up the KO onto this Tyranitar, and then we're looking at a Game 3. So just really well played adjustments from Brady, going for those nasty plots and using this Rotom as the core of his strategy.
Rotom has been such a pivotal Pokemon for Brady, and Rotom's going to still try its best, was hoping to get the switch in onto the Togekiss, but unfortunately got the Thunderbolt into the Protect instead, and still not enough. This Max Rockfall just continuing to chip away damage, but not really secure the knockout.
Does bring back the Sandstorm, which will help Tyranitar's special defense, though.
It will.
Which, again, is going to be important moving forwards. We still haven't seen that weakness policy activate on Tyranitar yet, and even though Tyranitar is burned, is intimidated, if it is hit by a super effective attack, it's possible that something like a critical hit will give Eduardo the opening he needs to win this game. So I like how he's keeping that option open. I like that he's also keeping the chip damage on the field. He doesn't even have to knock out the Rotom with an attack this turn. The Sandstorm will take care of that for him.
Absolutely.
So he can go ahead and focus on that Arcanine, or just click Rock Slide and, you know, maybe try to get an attack in with the Gastrodon. But again, Eduardo needs to find a way to set up this Togekiss in order to win for him, knowing that it's going to be the Rotom, the Arcanine, and the Togekiss left for Brady. And the Conkeldurr as well.
And the Conkeldurr. Conkeldurr opting to preserve the Rotom maybe for a little bit later, but the Conkeldurr now switching in its stead. Arcanine going for the Snarl is not going to get any damage onto the Tyranitar that has gone for that Protect, but will get enough to get the knockout onto the Gastrodon.
Knowing that the Togekiss is going to be Eduardo's last Pokemon alongside of this Tyranitar, I think that sending in Conkeldurr is a very good play for Brady because he's preserving the one Pokemon that can threaten this Togekiss without question on Eduardo's side of the field. It's possible that this Conkeldurr could pick up a knockout onto this Togekiss with a couple of Ice Punches. It's not intimidated. There's no threat of the Intimidate anymore onto it. But given how much damage we saw it do last game after the Intimidate, I don't think one hit is going to be enough, whereas this Togekiss can easily pick up a KO with something like a Dazzling Gleam crit or an Air Slash before Conkeldurr. So going for the Mach Punch KO on Tyranitar is great here. It ensures that the Rotom on Brady's side of the field will have the opportunity to, you know, target this Togekiss down eventually, but it's going to be a really tough ask, and this Togekiss is going to need several critical hits in order to get there.
Well, we'll see whether or not I can get the first critical hit, but that's not going to be it. It's just going to be super effective damage. And unfortunately, even the critical hit wouldn't have been enough to get the knockout either, just based on how much we saw that Air Slash do. So this is going to be an uphill battle for Eduardo to climb, but this was a great adjustment by Brady in order to make sure that they had a leg in this match.
You have to keep in mind that the Snarls will continue to lower Togekiss's damage output for the situations where it does not get a critical hit. But given the fact that Arcanine has switched away from Snarls and is going for Heat Wave instead, I think that Brady has gotten the magic number of damage he was hoping for onto that Togekiss and is most likely going to go straight for the Thunderbolt into the Togekiss in this next turn. That being said, Sandstorm is still on the field, and it is possible that if this Togekiss is carrying Protect, as we've seen some of them do, Togekiss could Protect and try and stall out the remainder of the Sand, but with Brady's own Togekiss still in the picture as well, again, there's as much damage as possible onto the Togekiss, stall out this weather as long as possible before Rotom returns to the field, and that should be an easy win condition for Brady. Just very well adjusted, and I'm curious to see how Eduardo is going to stop this Rotom Wash from just dominating going into Game 3. I think he was hoping that the Gastrodon would do enough damage or would otherwise be threatening enough with that Storm Drain ability to stop the Rotom, but thanks to the presence of the Nasty Plot and the Dark type attack, that's just not the case.
Yeah, a lot of the switches that Eduardo had to make made it feel like Eduardo was playing very safe, and in turn that means that there's not too much that you get a chance to do yourself when you have to make all these switches. So maybe think about that a little bit for the next game. But this was been an incredible series so far between Brady and Eduardo, where they're both tied 1-1 at the moment, and this is going to come down to the Game 3 to see who's going to advance forward.
Yeah, one thing interesting to me that was just revealed in that last turn was that Brady's Togekiss is potentially faster than Eduardo's. When we were talking about adjustments going into Game 2, I mentioned that Trick Room might not be something that Eduardo would want to go for, given the fact that a Pokemon like Conkeldurr excels in it. But if Eduardo is, you know, this is essentially his last game potentially in this championship series, you know, everything is on the line for him at this moment. If he's worried about Rotom simply being faster and simply being aggressive like we've seen in that second game and to a certain extent in Game 1 from Brady, and you want to really try and catch your opponent off guard, Trick Room would be the way to do that. It's a risk. You have to make sure, you know, capital letters, bold, underlined, italics, all that stuff, maybe even blinky text, that you have an answer for the Conkeldurr. But if you can maneuver your way through Trick Room with Togekiss on the field so that Conkeldurr is KO'd prior to you know, everything else sort of working out in Brady's favor, then Trick Room would be the best way to do that. It's interesting to me that Brady is the only person we've seen throughout this series go for any form of speed control with those max airstreams on his own Togekiss. Usually when you're playing in these high-level matches, you want to have a speed control option available just so that you can counter any speed control that your opponent brings. But Eduardo has been very comfortable just rolling with whatever Brady does. But in order for him to move on to top 4 in this tournament, he needs to disrupt Brady's strategy. And outside of the potential Trick Room for the Gourgeist, he could also look at that Durant to try and deal big damage to just power through whatever Brady's going to bring. But given Brady's use of Arcanine, given how he's had the Conkeldurr, I don't think that's the answer. I think Eduardo either has to hope for something more like Game 1 or find a way to eliminate the Rotom Wash. Those are his win conditions.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't know if Durant's going to be the right play. I've seen it a couple of times where a lot of players will go for the Durant on that third and final game, and unfortunately it just doesn't quite work out for them. So I'm glad that on the leads here we're not seeing a Durant just yet. Maybe it's in the back, maybe you can play around it, but it will be Brady Smith with the same leads as we've seen a couple of times now. It's going to be the Arcanine and the Rotom Wash, and Eduardo matching the Arcanine at least with that Tyranitar in tow. So same leads to game 2, just maybe a bit of a different game plan.
Hopefully a different game plan, because if this plays out like Game 2, we know that Brady will be the one moving on into the top 4 here at Oceania, the Oceania International Championships. Looking at Eduardo's board state and how everything played out, you have to rely on Snarl. You have to try and offset those nasty plots. The adjustment to Togekiss here, though, and no Dynamax from any trainer. This is going to be interesting to watch it play out.
Well, there's not going to be a Snarl miss this time. The Snarls is going to connect with both the Rotom as well as the Arcanine. And Rotom going for the nasty plot, so it's going to be able to get off at least one stage of that special attack rise. But is it going to be enough? Is it going to be enough? Because this time there was no miss.
There was no miss, which is interesting. But more importantly, the Togekiss is out on the field early. And I think that Eduardo is looking to the Dynamax form of that Togekiss as his answer to this Rotom Wash. If you have enough Snarls on the field, and if your Togekiss is trained in a way that it's bulky enough, this would be the speed control. This would be the board state advantage that Eduardo was looking for in Game 2. It's an interesting pivot, though. I like how the Tyranitar avoided the burn from Brady. I think that that was a very good play for Brady early on. You want to get that burn on the field as soon as possible so that weakness policy isn't as scary. But now that Togekiss is revealed, I'm curious to see if Eduardo is going to prioritize the speed control or just doing damage down onto this Rotom to try and remove it. Arcanine is still available on both sides of the field to set up some Snarls as well. So really the clash of special attackers here is going to decide, I think, who will enter the end phase of this match favorably.
Snarl onto the Arcanine as well as the Rotom. Both of them, their special attack's going to fall, but it is going to be a Snarl right the way back from Brady's Arcanine as well. Getting the special attack drop onto both Pokemon on Eduardo's side of the field. Another nasty plot, though, to be able to increase the special attack yet again. So this time, we have the full nasty plot.
But this time the Rotom is taking a max Starfall when it's not Dynamaxed, and it looks like that Togekiss did not get the crit.
Did not get the crit, so that Rotom's going to be alive for this next turn, and it also is within berry range, so we'll be able to consume that berry and regain some of that health from the citrus berry.
And consuming the citrus berry before the Dynamax means it's also going to get more utility out of it. So Eduardo currently has, Brady currently has the speed advantage. We did not see the max airstream from that Togekiss. Brady has a nice chunk of health on that Rotom, and the Rotom also will be attacking at +2, potentially +1, depending on if the Snarl from the Arcanine connects. So this is the turn that Brady, if he wants to Dynamax the Rotom this game, which I would assume yes, given how well that worked for him back in Game 1, or Game 2, this is the turn where you Dynamax the Rotom, you go for the big damage onto the Arcanine, and then you follow up with the KO onto the Togekiss the next turn. I think that if Eduardo is playing this game safe, which was his game plan, I think, in games 1 and game 2, then you max guard the Togekiss here just so that you avoid the knockout on the Rotom. So I'm curious to see if Eduardo's going to call this with a max guard or if this Togekiss might get KO'd.
We're about to find out. Arcanine going for the Snarl. There is no max guard here because we did see a move. So Snarl moving first. Let's find out what's going to happen next. Because Eduardo's...
More Snarl first, of course.
Yeah, of course, more Snarl. So gotta just make sure you get the good boys doing their job right here, getting the Intimidates and the Snarls off. But the Max Lightning is going to come out from the Rotom, is going to go right into the Togekiss. But look at that, especially the attack drops actually being very important here for this Togekiss to hang on.
Yeah, if that Snarl would have missed on that Arcanine from Eduardo's onto the Rotom, then that would have been a knockout there. But Togekiss able to hold on and establish some speed control. Also missing a second critical hit on its own max move, but oh, never mind, that was a critical hit on that
It just didn't look like very much damage.
It just didn't look like very much damage, but more importantly, after the speed boost from the max airstream, this Togekiss should be moving first in the next turn. And given that this Togekiss will have the opportunity to go for the knockout onto the Rotom, there will still be more Snarl. There will be Snarl. That seems like it's the theme of this match.
That's the play.
But Togekiss has just been able to emerge from the top because of the timing of that max airstream from Eduardo. Prioritizing the speed control there was definitely the play, and also gives his Arcanine the benefit of moving first too. Not that these Arcanine are going to be dealing much damage to each other. I think going for trading Snarls back and forth is probably the best thing they can both do to support their partners. But still, really different board state, even though we're seeing sort of the same thing play out turn after turn.
More Snarls, the theme of the match.
Again, it's a good
Just
theme.
a couple more, but the Max Starfall, that means the Togekiss is able to move first. Max Starfall, we saw how much damage it did before. It's not going to matter how much damage it does now, because all it matters is it is going to be the knockout. I don't even think that critical hit mattered.
And Togekiss actually outsped the Arcanine on Brady's side of the field as well, which may be interesting going into the next turn depending on what Pokemon Brady sends in. If it's going to be that Conkeldurr, that means that this Arcanine will be unable to use another Snarl to lower that Togekiss's special attack and also put that Conkeldurr in a position where it'll be dealing some big damage. I think that if Brady brought his Togekiss to this game like we've seen in previous games, you have to send it out on the field now because you need that Togekiss to get KO'd before revealing the Conkeldurr. It's possible you could be a little bit bold and go for a Mach Punch to try and pick up the knockout onto Togekiss, but again, that is such a big play. Unnecessary risk. You know that Togekiss is going to be taking burn damage. You know it's going to be taking sandstorm damage if it wasn't going to run out in the next turn. You just have to sort of play this game out slowly. And again, Eduardo switching out the Togekiss here is saving it so that when the Conkeldurr is revealed as Brady's last Pokemon, if he brought it, it's ready to pick up those KOs.
I would agree with that. Save the Togekiss for a little bit later. Even though it's burned, it is going to be able to get off some impressive amounts of damage at the beginning. But more Snarls from both of these Arcanine. Not anything too different there that we don't expect. Special attack drops especially something that we are definitely used to here. But here's that Dazzling Gleam. Doesn't really do too much damage though, but more importantly, it's going to prop that weakness policy for Tyranitar, and Tyranitar now going to have so much utility in this match. Unfortunately, the Sandstorm is going to subside though.
I think Brady was hoping that the Tyranitar would have switched in the turn a little bit earlier to connect that Will-O-Wisp onto it, but the Arcanine still will outspeed. That Tyranitar wasn't on the field when Togekiss was going for those airstreams to pick up speed, so it can threaten the burn on top of it, but unlike previous games, there is no Intimidate, so it'll just be the burn and the weakness policy, which is still going to be dealing a massive amount of damage. I like how Eduardo has positioned this. I think switching into the Dazzling Gleam there was a really smart play, and if Tyranitar is able to pick up a knockout here, especially against something like this Conkeldurr, this could be the out he was looking for.
Arcanine going for Protect. Not totally the out yet, but Tyranitar going for the Rock Slide.
No Snarl.
No Snarl, yeah. It is a little bit different, so that's kind of nice that we're going to get a chance to see something just a little bit different here, but the Rock Slide from the Tyranitar will at least be able to connect with the Conkeldurr.
Yeah, I wonder if the Mach Punch from Conkeldurr would be enough to knock out Tyranitar at this range. It did so much damage against the Tyranitar in Game 2, I would wonder if Brady feels comfortable going for it. I think I would if I were in his situation, just because I wouldn't want that Tyranitar to threaten the knockout onto my Arcanine with something like another Rock Slide. That Gastrodon isn't going to be dealing a lot of damage to Conkeldurr either. Keeping Arcanine around, I think, is really going to be important to just keep those Intimidates available in case you need them. But if you're able to remove the Tyranitar and not have to worry about Rock Slide against your Togekiss, that would definitely be one thing that would really open up this board for Brady quite nicely.
Just another example on the field of how really protecting your Intimidate Pokemon is so important. But look at that.
Intimidate was huge.
Yeah, that was really big brain plays coming out there, because that
Togekiss.
is going to be a knockout onto the Togekiss from that Rock Slide. It's just a great example of why preserving your Intimidate Pokemon is so important.
Exactly. The Togekiss is gone. Brady does get the opportunity to switch in this Arcanine to get an Intimidate down onto this Tyranitar, but I think this is too little too late. Conkeldurr does have access to recovery, could use something like the Drain Punch to target down this Arcanine in order to heal itself back up, but you have to worry about that Tyranitar initially. It is within KO range. You could easily go for a Mach Punch, pick up that knockout. If you ignore it, it's going to use Rock Slide, pick up the KO on Arcanine, and then Conkeldurr will be very, very close behind. I think that Eduardo just saving the Togekiss and saving that Arcanine was really the key that separated this game, I think, from the last game. Also getting more damage down onto that Rotom a lot quicker. Super, super important.
Arcanine getting preserved again. Gastrodon coming in. Brady's Arcanine going for a Protect. Conkeldurr now going for the Mach Punch. This time it's going to get the knockout.
That was pretty easy, I think, relative to the last turn, though.
Yeah.
Protect on Arcanine, though, a waste. It's not going to have it available to it against this Gastrodon, which is going to be key. I mean, look at this Conkeldurr on Brady's side of the field. The Conkeldurr is the Pokemon that is going to be dealing damage at this point in time. It has 2 Intimidates on it, and all Eduardo has to do is switch in that Togekiss, and then Eduardo can get a 3rd Intimidate. Conkeldurr is in a position where it might have to be fishing for critical hits.
It was going for the double protect, not able to do it though. We will see the special attack drops from the Snarl coming out from Eduardo's Arcanine, but that's so unfortunate that the double protect didn't get a chance to go off here. Conkeldurr going for the Drain Punch into the Gastrodon. Look how little damage it does to that Gastrodon. Does get a chance to heal up a little bit here, but it's time for Gastrodon to go for a move. It's going to be that Earth Power right into the Arcanine. It is going to be the knockout. Conkeldurr, the last Pokemon left for Brady versus the 3 that Eduardo still has.
You have to wonder why Brady went for the double protect there onto Arcanine. He didn't want to lose it quite yet, which I think makes a lot of sense. You know, that is his last 2 Pokemon, and he is now in a 3v1 situation with a twice intimidated Conkeldurr. But looking at the options available to him, I would have thought a Snarl might have been beneficial just to try and buy this Conkeldurr more time. You need time to use these Drain Punches to get your health back up to try and restore everything. And that Ice Punch there, possibly even fishing for a freeze onto that Arcanine. Just really trying to find and identify every single out. And that's exactly the kind of play that you have to do when you're trying to